Afghanistan was known for ruins and broken promises. Yet, in just 2 years under Taliban rule, satellite imagery shows a nation transformed by the roar of new roads, bridges, and a colossal canal so vast it threatens the borders of Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. This flood of construction has stunned even the Taliban's harshest critics, raising urgent questions about how a regime famous for banning progress is now building faster than the West ever did, and at what hidden cost. The answer is less simple and far more explosive than anyone expected. The Kosh-Tepe Canal cuts a raw scar across northern Afghanistan, stretching toward the horizon, with a scale that defies the country's recent memory. Construction began in the spring of 2022, and by late 2024, satellite images confirm nearly half the planned 285 kilometers have been excavated, with some sections joined by temporary channels called jumpers. Around 6,000 workers, most of them Afghan, keep the earth movers running day and night. Taliban officials claim the canal will transform 550,000 hectares of barren ground into farmland, a one-third boost to Afghanistan's total arable land. The canal's chief engineer, Qari Hafizullah Aka, calls it Afghanistan's national destiny, a project that will feed the nation and prove its independence. But the canal's promise comes with a shadow. The Amu Darya River, which feeds the canal, also sustains millions in Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. In July 2023, both countries' foreign ministries delivered a formal protest, warning that the diversion could trigger severe water shortages downstream. Uzbek hydrologists, drawing on decades of regional data, warn that every cubic meter lost upstream weakens their harvests. One expert puts it bluntly: the canal risks turning a neighbor into a rival. The engineering itself raises questions. The canal is mostly earth, not lined with concrete, which means huge losses to seepage and evaporation. Some estimates say up to 40% of the water could vanish before it reaches Afghan fields. In November 2023, a breach at kilometer 75 created a sprawling artificial lake visible from space. The Taliban called it a controlled release to recharge groundwater, but independent monitors suggest it was a sign of rushed construction and structural weakness. Despite the risks, Taliban leaders insist the canal will continue. Afghanistan is not a signatory to the water-sharing pacts that bind its neighbors, and officials frame the project as reclaiming a historical right. Regional bodies like the Interstate Commission for Water Coordination have called for joint studies and technical talks, but Taliban negotiators refuse to slow the pace, describing external pressure as unjust interference. As the canal carves deeper into the landscape, its impact is already visible from above. Satellite time-lapse reveals a patchwork of freshly dug earth, auxiliary barriers, and growing tension along the river's path. For the Taliban, the Kosh-Tepe Canal is more than infrastructure. It is a declaration. For their neighbors, it is a looming threat that could redraw the region's water map. North of Kabul, the Salang Tunnel once stood as a symbol of Afghanistan's isolation, frequently choked by snow, battered by decades of war, and left in disrepair. In March 2023, Taliban engineers reopened the tunnel after a winter that stranded dozens of trucks for days. Local officials credit the rapid response and repairs with saving lives and restoring the country's main north-south artery. Satellite images from spring 2023 show clear lanes and fresh ventilation towers, a dramatic change from the gridlocked, snowbound passage of years prior. Across the provinces, newly paved highways now link cities that were once cut off for months at a time. The road from Herat to Badghis, for example, was notorious for impassable stretches and ambushes. By late 2024, traffic moves smoothly along freshly laid asphalt, with bridges spanning rivers that used to force detours of hours or even days. Around Kandahar and Balkh, roadwork crews have completed dozens of bridges and feeder roads, opening up remote districts to trade and travel. Rail ambitions have moved from paper to reality. In August 2023, the first cargo train crossed from Iran into Herat province along the Herat-Kaf Railway. That inaugural shipment marked Afghanistan's first direct rail link to Iranian ports, bypassing long, risky truck convoys. The Taliban have announced plans for a much larger trans-Afghan railway, over 570 kilometers from Uzbekistan to Pakistan, with trilateral agreements signed and a tentative construction start set for 2025. Local logistics officials describe these new routes as a lifeline, noting that for the first time goods from Central Asia can reach southern markets without crossing a single mountain pass. International observers have taken notice. There is a stark irony. One analyst who spent years tracking aid-funded projects under the previous government points out that more was built in 2 years under Taliban rule than in the previous decade, at a visible cost to freedom. Satellite time-lapse from 2022 to 2024 confirms the difference. Ribbons of new highway, restored tunnel portals, and rail sidings where only dirt tracks stood before. The scale of construction raises questions that echo beyond Afghanistan's borders. Provincial logistics officials speak of a transformation, but the resources behind this surge remain opaque. With so many projects underway at once, the next challenge emerges. How is all this being paid for? Construction surge. Afghanistan's construction surge is powered by cash streams that rarely see daylight. At the heart of the funding is a network of mining contracts, more than 200 signed since August 2021, most with new or Afghan-registered companies, many tied to Chinese, Turkish, and Qatari interests. Official figures claim over $8 billion in pledged investment, but almost none of these deals are subject to independent audit, and environmental reviews are virtually non-existent. Mining revenue, collected directly at mine sites and border crossings like Torkham and Hairatan, is often handled in cash, with significant amounts bypassing the central treasury. An anonymous customs administrator describes daily digital logs, but admits most large payments move through informal channels or hawala networks. Receipts spike. In 2023, customs receipts spiked, yet field reports suggest much of this windfall is siphoned off to provincial power brokers and security commanders. The June 2024 collapse of the Amu Darya oil contract with China's CPEIC, ending with Taliban forces seizing Chinese passports and holding staff, exposed the volatility behind these arrangements. While the Taliban touts self-sufficiency, real mining revenue likely falls short of the sums needed to bankroll mega projects, leaving infrastructure progress vulnerable to sudden shocks and opaque transfers. International aid. Meanwhile, international aid, though now routed to non-governmental organizations, is routinely taxed or diverted at Taliban-run checkpoints, with receipts and memos documenting millions redirected each year. A verification graphic from SIGAR and UNOCHA confirms that between $175 million and $300 million in aid is absorbed annually by Taliban-imposed fees, often disguised as administrative or security costs. These hidden flows keep the machinery of construction moving, but their fragility and secrecy foreshadow the social costs that follow. In September 2021, the Taliban issued a decree banning girls from secondary education. Since then, empty classrooms sit where eager students once learned, while women who helped design city bridges or manage construction sites have been sent home. An engineer who once led teams on Kabul's urban projects now shares blueprints in secret. Her name is withheld for safety. She describes watching the city transform from behind closed doors, feeling pride in Afghan skill but grief at exclusion. She says, "We have been pushed from work. The roads outside are new. Whose Afghanistan is this?" The human cost extends beyond gender. In the summer of 2023, Taliban forces swept through Balkab district in Saripul province, targeting Hazara communities after a local commander's revolt. Human Rights Watch and UNAMA confirm at least 50 civilian deaths and over 27,000 people forced from their homes. Satellite images reveal entire Hazara villages burned, fields abandoned, and aid convoys blocked. These events unfold as new highways and rail lines promise national progress. But for many Afghans, especially women and minorities, development arrives hand in hand with erasure. The price of rapid construction is measured not just in dollars, but in futures lost. On August 2, 2025, the Afghan Ministry of Water and Energy signed a $10 billion memorandum of understanding with Azizi Energy, led by businessman Mirwais Azizi. $10 billion. The plan promises 10,000 megawatts of new electricity, a figure that would dwarf Afghanistan's current grid. 10,000. Construction is set to begin with a 200-megawatt solar plant near Kabul, with the first phase scheduled to deliver power within 8 months. At the same time, the Taliban have advanced a $4.8 billion agreement for a 573-kilometer trans-Afghan railway, aiming to link Uzbekistan with Pakistan. Trans-Afghan. These projects draw cautious attention from neighboring powers. Chinese analysts describe Afghanistan as a potential energy and transit corridor, but they warn that investment comes without diplomatic recognition or security guarantees. Energy. Pakistani officials, while eager for new trade routes, quietly question whether the Taliban can deliver on promises that eluded the previous government. The paradox is stark, a regime cut off from international legitimacy, yet forging deals that could reshape the region's infrastructure. For every kilometer of new rail or pipeline, the question lingers. Can a state that excludes half its citizens and faces global isolation become a hub for regional progress? Or does development without recognition deepen the divide? Today, Afghanistan's new infrastructure rises while half its people remain in the dark, literally and figuratively. As global powers weigh economic opportunity against moral cost, the world faces a dilemma. Progress built on exclusion isn't stability. The foundations poured now decide who gets to share in tomorrow.